Hey, good evening, everyone. David McGuffin here. It is Travel Talk Tuesday again on January 31st, 2023. Thank you for tuning in either live on Facebook or Zoom, or if you're watching later, thank you for watching a little bit later. I've had a blast today putting together this video that we're going to present tonight about the big Holy Family Church in Barcelona, known as La Sagrada Familia. And I was there back in August, late August, early September, just last year, and had an opportunity to spend 3 or 4 hours there, taking my time along with Jim and Valerie that I was traveling with to experience a whole lot about the church and its history. So tonight, I hope you enjoy this presentation about the La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, Spain, the brainchild of Antoni Gaudí. And so without further ado, let me just get started with the video and I'll talk above as we continue going. Okay. Hey, David McGuffin here. We're in Barcelona, and this is the Holy Family Church, La Sagrada Familia. This is a piece of art done by the famous architect Antoni Gaudí. He began construction here in 1883. The cathedral, the temple was already under construction for a year, but he was assigned the task of being the main architect in 1883, and he worked on it until 1926 on his death. We're sitting here looking at the eastern facade, I believe, the eastern facade, the nativity facade here. And this is one of the facades that Antoni Gaudí was able to complete before his death, which gave further architects and construction managers a look into the vision of Antoni Gaudí. There's no original plans from him, but everyone's taking it up here. It's fully funded by donations and by our paying the admission cost to get in here each day, and it's due to be completed in about 4 more years, in 1926, which would be the 100th anniversary of Antoni Gaudí's death. So we're going to take a look around the outside and inside of the La Sagrada Familia today. So this particular scene is taken from the park, which is kind of to the northeast. And here's a Google Earth thing that I came across today. I did. First of all, a really good thing is you can see an example of this area that I talked about last week called the Eixample, the New Town, that was laid out in a block form. And you see the streets going parallel and perpendicular to the seaside. And look at each block is the corners are all rounded off. And this was a city plan to get outside of the medieval walls, which we talked about last week, to get out of those walls and to build a whole new city outside of those walls, bringing up the population to over 4 million people or so. And so you can see how that plan changes right here in this area, as opposed to what's happening up the hill, up the mountain, and also down the hill toward the seaside. So La Sagrada Familia is a bit to the northeast of the city center. I'm kind of struggling with my mouse to home into the whole area, but there you see some of those block plans with chopped off corners. And this is La Sagrada Familia. The Google Earth video is from about 6 years ago, so it's even more completed right now than you see here. There's one of those chopped off blocks. Here's a park on the let's say on the western facade. And then if you were to think, this is ultimately going to be the grand entrance right here to the cathedral. Actually, you see that there's a block of houses here that are going to have to be torn down. And so in order for it to be a grand entrance ramp to the cathedral when it's finally finished up in 2026. Now, I've stopped here just a second and I've overlaid this onto that cathedral. And you see the entrance esplanade. And there are three facades that will ultimately appear. The Nativity facade is where tourists go in now. And we enter through a small little door here. And the tour inside the basilica is you walk around, go back around the choir in that area, and then you go out and look at the Passion facade, and then you exit out that way. This entrance to the Glory facade is still covered up. They're still working on the Glory facade, and there is no grand esplanade out here. This is where that's going to go when those buildings are torn down and a grand entrance to the cathedral is made before 2026. There's a backstory to that in the 1950s, a mayor of Barcelona gave permission for a builder to go ahead and build these apartments on this area of land that was already donated and dedicated to the entrance to the Cathedral La Sagrada Familia. And because work was progressing so slowly, in his mind, he thought that, well, this is never going to happen. So I'm going to let people build and let's get taxes from all those people. So they did. Now the city is having to buy back all those buildings and pay back all the tenants to condemn those buildings and start all over again. I'll let this Google Earth video run a tad bit more. You can kind of see, but those are the important points. And you can see the cathedral's laid out just like a regular Gothic cathedral on the form of a Latin cross, 300 feet long and 200 feet wide with the arms and the apse. This is where the altar is and everything back here. That area is called the ambulatory. And you can see it's pretty much completed. And these are some photos I just took in August. So let me let it run here. I'm taking this from the pretty much the northern side of the cathedral facade. Now I put Nativity facade there because that is the facade that Antoni Gaudí actually completed before his death. Now, in the Middle Ages, all cathedrals were laid out on a west to east orientation, meaning that the western door was the door that you walked into the cathedral, and you worshiped in the direction of the east, which is the way of Bethlehem, where Christ was born. And so if you happen to be in a town which has a medieval Gothic cathedral, then you can look at that cathedral and you can always tell which is north, south, east, and west by looking at the entrance door to the cathedral and knowing that it is west, facing west, and that the way in which you worship and the altar is to the east. This is a little off kilter. It's kind of it's kind of like 33 degrees off kilter, meaning that north is not true north. But right here, we're looking pretty much in this direction, looking at, we're just going to call it the northern facade of this basilica. And you can see that is awe-inspiring and a whole lot different than any other cathedral you'll see anywhere else in the world. I do think they need to do something about cleaning up that lake there because it is brown and nasty. They need a reflecting pool or something there. But everything's still under construction. So this is the Nativity facade, which means that it was designed by Antoni Gaudí and carried out under his direct supervision, and it depicts Christ's birth, all the events leading up to that. One of the things that I kind of found interesting is the slaughter of the innocents, where Herod put out the decree to kill all the babies. And here's a Roman centurion holding up a baby, and the parent begging for mercy at the end. Now we're looking here at this area here, which happens to have two cloisters and a big ambulatory facade here. So that's still under construction, and what are these photos are from. This is that area where I was just showing on that little drawing right there. But you can see, look at all of the modernistic architectural style, asymmetrical, freeform, resembling nature, all up through there. I think there's some images coming up with scorpions and geckos and turtles and serpents all over the place on the back side of the ambulatory and these cloisters. Inside, when we finally go into that gate, this is where a section that Gaudí actually built to inside. It's the entrance to one of those cloisters. And so that's about the only thing left that he has completed, besides the facade we just saw, the Nativity facade, and the entrance to this cloister. There's the Holy Mary of the Rosary statue there. And now we're going inside the actual basilica. This is the timeline actually on the basilica website, and I just thought it would be instrumental to scroll through here so that you can see the timeline and the dates. But Gaudí took over in 1883, and then these are some photos I grabbed off the web. 1923, right before, 3 years before his death. This is what it looked like. 1925, 1 year before his death. This is what Gaudí was looking at. I think that's pretty cool, because you see that first Nativity facade, the entrance to the chapel, and you see one side wall going up. And for me, as a builder, it's interesting to note that, they built this whole huge facade with wooden scaffolding and everything. And then they started building the sidewall. And then right after Gaudí's death, the second facade came up and started being constructed. And so I know there was a master plan, because Gaudí had that. And it was in effect until about 1936, when the Spanish Civil War began to happen. Something happened, it was bombed or exploded, and all of Gaudí's original plans in his workshop went up in flames. And so luckily, Gaudí had some apprentices that he was working with, and he knew all along he was not going to be able to live until the completion of the cathedral. But he knew that God had a plan, and in God's plan, God would pick the right people to continue with the style that Gaudí anticipated and was planning and completed up until his death. So this is 1925. One day you might want to scroll back through all this history and see it, but I thought it was interesting to read everything and know when various elements actually popped up. And through this timeline that I'm scrolling through on their website, I'm showing what it looks like in 1953. Not a whole lot of work was done between the time Gaudí died in 53. And then another one's coming up here real soon. I think I've got it chronicled all the way up. 1974, the Passion facade, which is the other side, is almost complete. Several architects took over. There's at least 4 of them so far that have overseen the plans. 1992 color photos. 1995, you can see scaffolding was beginning to be used, and these big cranes as well. And 2002, it's taking shape. All these tree-shaped columns on the interior were assembled already. No roof, of course. And this is a view from 2013 from the roof with workmen looking down onto that. Getting into our era of 2020, pre-COVID, work stopped, believe it or not, at COVID for about 6 months or more. And then they continued working again, I'm sure with masks, and got the larger towers completed and the star placed on the top of the Virgin Mary Tower. And that was put up in December of 2021. And then just this past Christmas, the caps were put on the facades of 2 of the Evangelist Towers. Now, this is, we walked inside, and here I am filming in here, and it's something you've never seen before. Me either. There's 4 columns that are red in color called, I gotta refer to my notes here, some sort of stone, red stone that has tips of glistening marble inside them. And those are the huge columns, the 4 columns that are going to support this grand spire that goes up 560 feet. There's an organ here. This is the altar. You can see right there. But you can see that all of these columns, these are the columns called the columns of the apostles. The evangelists, sorry. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And each one has an insignia of a lion, for example, for Mark, insignia and the name of the evangelist that wrote the first the Gospels in the New Testament of the Bible. Just massive, white and clean. I recall the first time I ever walked in here, there was no roof, very little stained glass in there, but now it is very close to completion. We're looking from the altar back in the direction to the west to the entrance doors. Now the entrance doors are blocked off on the outside. Now we're looking from the entrance doors, looking down the nave to the choir, to the altar, and then up to the top. But just look at that. I mean, Gaudí just had a vision of nature, of God's creation, and wanted to emulate that inside the cathedral. Built for God, of course. This is up on an upper level in where the choir is, actually, where the choir will be, which will host about 500 people. But I was looking down on a service of some of the monks who live there worshiping. This is let me back it up just a second. This is actually the door, the entrance door to the basilica. And at the moment, the entrance door is put on in reverse because the only way you can see it is from inside the basilica, let's say on the western facade. And it is the Lord's Prayer. And it's written in 50 different languages, but the big part of it that sticks out is the part that says, "Give us this day our daily bread." And eventually, when this facade is completed, the doors will be turned around and reversed. This will face the outside. And this will be where the worshipers come in to celebrate worshiping Jesus Christ. This is the altar, the canopy above the altar. This is some shots Charlotte took several years ago as well. I missed that whole thing. There's the eagle of Mark, Matthew, and these are on those 4 big red columns. Going back again, we're going to talk a little bit about the Passion facade, which is on the other side of the cathedral. Let's say it's on the south side of the cathedral. Passion facade, as you can see, Jesus Christ on the cross at the very top, but it's all the events leading up to the Passion of Christ, to the death of Christ. And those are, the Last Supper, the betrayal, Christ being hung on the cross, and also the ascension of Christ, the resurrection and the ascension of Christ into heaven. And so this is the Passion facade. It was conceived by Gaudí, but it was completed by people 100 years later, because they were just going on the concept that Antoni Gaudí had presented. This is the Passion of Christ facade on the more or less south side of the cathedral. You can see Christ bearing the cross there, casting lots for his clothes, a little bit of everything. It's all captured there in this asymmetrical and very modernist art style. Down below in the crypt, what will be the crypt, is a museum, and I captured a few moments there, a little bit about a model of the church. Pope Benedict XVI showed up there in 2010 and consecrated the church. Of course, Gaudí died in 1926, and that was a little bit of his service in another church. This is his death mass. This is one of the few pictures we have, photographs we have of Antoni Gaudí. And this is the first stone being laid, a caricature in 1882. Another model of the church, 1926, on June 10th. Antoni Gaudí was walking across the street and of all things got hit by a streetcar and died way before his time of age to die, for sure. A few more things. This is kind of interesting here, some of the close-ups in the museum of some of the capitals on those spires. This is Antoni Gaudí's grave, which is down in the crypt. And those spires, they resemble the mitre or the hat of a bishop, a ring, and the crook that the bishop carries. This is Antoni Gaudí's, what's left of his workshop, with some of his notes there, and a depiction of what the La Sagrada Familia will look like when it's finally completed. And one final Google Map look around. We're looking here at what will be the grand entrance here. This block of buildings will be gone. You'll enter here into what we would say is mostly Western facade. This over here, remember, is the Nativity facade, the first one we saw that Gaudí did complete. Over here on the back side, on the western side, is where the ambulatory, the altar, the choir, and everything is. The big nave going here. And then the far side, as we get around here, is the Passion facade. Now, the grand entrance facade is going to be called the Glory facade, because we're glorying to God in the highest when we all are resurrected and we go to heaven. And that's what the Glory facade is. Now, there's a very much of a religious theme going on here right now, because I wanted to portray to you what Gaudí had in mind, because he was a very devout man and believed in the church and in Jesus Christ and in the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And that would also happen to us as followers of Christ, as Christians, as well as we walk through our life and we go from the grave to the resurrection. So we have again, to recap, we've got that great Nativity facade. We've got that great Passion of Christ facade. And then we got that great facade that is soon to be completed of the Glory facade. Now, this whole basilica is due to be completed in 2026. So they've got quite a few bit more of spires to put up there. There's one that's in the work. The last one that was just completed is the Virgin Mary spire that soars to, let me refer to my notes here, soars to about 400 feet in the air, and they're working and moving on. They've completed about 4 of the 8 levels of the final spire, which is the spire of Jesus Christ, and it's 560 feet up into the air with a huge star on top as well. We're definitely going to have a tour in 2026. We're definitely going to be doing a tour to Barcelona to see the final completion of Antoni Gaudí's La Sagrada Familia. Of course, we're not going to get an invite to the grand opening and the celebration mass, but we will be there in 2026 on one of our 2 tours, which is either the Best of the Med tour or the Best of Spain tour. So thank you guys for watching tonight and being a part of this. Let me go back here full screen. It is so very nice to connect every week that I am in town and in the United States with you on Travel Talk Tuesday. Next week, we're moving on to the north, to the center of Spain, and we're talking about Madrid, the capital of Spain. But until then, hey, your adventure starts right here with David McGuffins, Exploring Europe. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.